Let's talk about Cardano. It's time to check in today. Honestly, I'm in love with this graphic. I found it on X somewhere, and I love the whole 8-bit. It's coming down, destroying the world. It kind of reminds me of the old NES game, Russian Attack. Lucas, you're a big fan, right?
A huge fan of Russian Attack. I can't believe you're bringing that up. Possibly my favorite NES game, except for maybe Mario 2. But
Ninja Gaiden's my favorite. That's classic.
Yeah.
I can play through Ninja Gaiden without getting hit up until like the last level, and then it gets just this crazy hard, and I've never been that great at it.
There is no NES game or any video game that I've ever been any good at. So, but
I know that's a problem too.
I was always a Sega guy when it came to the wars.
I was always Tails in Sega because I was dying all the time and chasing whoever was Sega and continued on.
Sega was good. Sega was really good. It took me a while to come around to it.
I do like the Cardano symbol right in the middle. So there we go. I will accept that with 100% happiness.
Look at those flames, though. It's like Cardano's coming down to like set the world on fire.
Exactly.
That's what it's doing.
I didn't realize this was Cardano's symbol, this sort of nucleus, but it's right in line with Charles Hoskinson to be appealing to all of these hysterical physics and computer history. It's right on brand for him. But Charles Hoskinson is less and less to do with Cardano. It
right.
seems
Hoskins is out, in with the dReps. So
yeah, with the dReps, that's right. Although I will say this about Charles, so he was on X this morning, and he was actually talking about Elon and how Elon is bad at some things and good at some things. And then he said, pause for a second, says, "Yeah, I guess I have the same problem."
Oh, there's some humility. There's
some humility. No, he was talking about the Doge and all that stuff, the Department of Governmental Efficiency and everything like this. And so eventually it came down to this idea that, if you were a cameraman and you videotaped a bank being robbed, and then, you told the people that the bank was being robbed, and they caught the person who robbed the bank, and instead of them being mad at the bank robber, they're mad at you for telling them. I mean, I kind of think that's what the problem is with the Dems at the moment with this stuff, but that's just my opinion.
Well, you're bang on point there, but that's also the nature of politics. And yeah, I've wondered how the rubber was going to meet the road with notions of code is law and immutability and things written mean something, meet the government of the United States. But Elon's finding it out. But I'm also glad. I'm glad that we're discovering things. So
it's being uncovered. But
yes,
I mean that sort of segues into the Cardano governance sort of thing. So as you mentioned earlier, Charles is basically out. I mean, his company is still actively, doing things, developing, but he's got no more right to affect, the parameters. He's got no more right to affect the budget. He's got no more ability to impose. So he's got to go through this processes that everyone else does now. And this all happened recently where it went live in mainnet. There was a hard fork just a little while ago that sort of enabled all this stuff. And so, if you go to gov.tools and I think you should be able to look up the dRep directory. So if you go to dRep directory, so if you were to click on dRep directory and
I'll follow along. The site's a little slow.
If you just take a look at all the list of the dRep sort of people, they have this idea of voting power. So if you were to look up, so I've recently just become a dRep myself. So if you were to search Grokism, you would see that some people have actually delegated their ADA to me. So the way it works is,
oh my gosh, so we got to do this. If you're watching this show and you want the coolest rep of all time, you got to delegate your ADA to Grokism right here. Here it is. This is the call to action.
Agree with you on that one, right? So
it's on the screen.
People talk about, what is your philosophy about blockchain and stuff like that? What kind of philosophy do you have about how to spend the budget? Because that's ultimately what we're talking about here. We're really talking about two major things. But if you think about what a government does, I mean, this is exactly what a government does. It configures the parameters and how it's going to function within limits, but it also decides who's going to spend the budget. And so, in case you don't know, ADA has, for every transaction, there is a small amount of ADA that actually goes to a treasury. And this treasury,
how much is it? Like, is it like less than 1%? Is it like a half?
Yeah, it's less than 1%. I mean, it's adding up to have a value now of with the increase in value of ADA, relatively recently, it's probably worth right now maybe around $1 billion to $1.5 billion, which is a lot of money. And the idea of it was to be able to use it for projects, for marketing, in a lot of cases to avoid this sort of venture capitalist sort of craze, where you have rug pulls, where a venture capitalist comes in and says, hey, we're going to give you all kinds of money. You go ahead and do some stuff. And then you put your token on the market. And then basically, as soon as it's of value enough, you simply sell all of the tokens, take your money out and go, right? It's in a way, I think that's sort of the vision they had. And I think it's done.
You guys are paving the way for what is going to be the soon government mandated hard forks of all crypto, is when the governments of the world say, hey, wait a minute, we don't even have to worry about taxes anymore. We'll just bake it into the blockchain, just like the Cardano guys did. Thanks a lot, Rob.
I think if you think about taxes and how the government, how our government going forward is going to be able to tax, transactions on the internet with blockchain tokens and stuff like that, whether it's Bitcoin or something, I think they're going to have to go to a point of sale sort of consumption tax. I mean, the idea of, because people could get paid in a bunch of different currencies, right? And, when you buy something, I think it's a perfect opportunity to pay whatever taxes. I mean, I'm not a complete, I don't believe that the federal government can exist without some sort of taxation. I mean, I believe we need a strong defense, and I believe that there's probably some services that the federal government are uniquely qualified to serve. And
is this the kind of speech that you had to give to the Cardano Foundation to become a dRep, or tell us how that process came about? Did you have to get nominated by your local political unit, organizational unit? Is this?
At one point in time, I was the chair of the Forward Party of Minnesota. You probably didn't know that. So Andrew Yang's Forward Party, I was actually the chair of Minnesota, right? And so I did become a little bit political. So yeah, I had to do a little bit of a political sort of speech. I'm not normally a political person.
But for being a dRep, you had to do it, or?
No. What I did was, all you really have to do to become a dRep is deposit 500 ADA, or about, I think it's just 500 ADA into.
But you got way more than 500. You got 27-something thousand here. So this means that your 500 went into the pile. Maybe you threw some extra in there, and then some other people were saying, I'm going to put my ADA into a smart contract and then point it at Grokism. Is that kind of how it works?
No. So this is a misnomer with a lot of, like, for example, staking in Cardano. To me, it's one of the most valuable things about it. all you're doing is delegating to it. You're not giving up custody of it. You're not putting it in any smart contract. All you're doing is associating a wallet. You connect a wallet, and then you just give it permission. And in this particular case, I actually had to pay 500 ADA and it just went into a deposit sort of wallet. And once I stop or once I decide, if I do decide to stop being a dRep, I'll get that 500 ADA back. So it's just sort of deposited. But the 500 ADA is just a deposit. I don't know. It's maybe to
Wait, but you had to do a transaction though, right? You had to send it somewhere. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you did have to but only that 500 ADA, right? Nothing else. So the voting power is my ADA that is delegated to it. So I don't lose custody of that. Beyond the 500 ADA that I deposited, I don't lose custody of any of the other voting or any of the other ADA I have. And it's the same thing with staking. So you can, with Cardano staking, you can delegate your ADA to a stake pool, right? And what it does is it increases the chances that that particular stake pool is going to produce blocks. And then, you get the block rewards. But you can take that ADA out anytime. It's not, I could use my ADA, in any way that I want normally, right? And all it really does is every 5 days, it checks to see if that ADA is still delegated to that stake pool, and if it is, it just goes on. But you don't lose custody of it. It doesn't go into a smart contract or anything like that, which I think is one of the best advantages of ADA, of Cardano generally. But the voting power is not just my ADA; it's other people's ADA that are delegating to my voting power as a dRep, right?
So that's kind of the political process. Is you need to go out there in the community. You got to stump for yourself. Say I should be representing your ADA, and then they do this special thing within the Cardano ecosystem, and then you accumulate more power, and then you're able to represent the strength of that voting block inside of the Cardano votes that take place.
Yeah, correct. That's absolutely correct. So,
Lucas, what does this remind you most of as far as governmental systems? Is this like the most purest form of a constitutional republic, or what do they got going on here?
Well, I think it is. I think it is a constitutional republic, and I think that's probably pretty much exactly what it is. But the flaw here, and I've said this before, is that what we're talking about is one ADA equals one vote, right? So you have to go through all of these sort of things where you have to have allies of voting power, right? I think it's a flaw. One ADA, one vote is a flaw because, rich people, just like they do with our federal government, have more ability to affect legislation than, people who aren't rich, right? So I think there's this whole methodology that's probably going to change in the future where I think they call it quadratic voting or something like that, where it comes down to one ADA, one vote. And then it will become more of a pure sort of constitutional sort of republic, because then you could assign your single vote to someone, in this case, a representative. But that's not how it works now. It's not. I would say it is pure in some ways, but one ADA, one vote, I think, is a flaw and sort of removes the purity of it. But I think it still functions, and in the end, we'll look for ways to improve it and to make it better.
Yeah, when I think about that was exactly the concern. Whenever you said, I didn't think about it too much until you said $1 billion to $1.5 billion in the treasury, and then I thought, ooh, how much will that pervert the political system, once one person is given that away, Charles Hoskinson has given that away, political systems are made to be gamed. And we talk a lot about the idealism of a republic, but a republic is about, it's a proof of stake. And the Republic of the United States was started with the notion that landowners were the stakeholders that got a say in government, and we've moved to some sort of notion of a soul-bound token of one person, one vote. But whenever there is convertibility into dollars or into other things, and there are a whole lot of votes out there that one person can amass, that's going to get very interesting in if the I don't know, if the conversion price of that treasury is sustained. So so is Cardano already seeing that? Because in some way I could see like existing corporations who are looking to blockchain technologies to be saying, oh, we can invest in ADA, and then we can turn around and we can fund our research and development or some sort of blockchain project with that $1.5 billion.
Yeah, if you think about just this thing you have showing on the page right now, Cardano Foundation strengthens commitment to governance as a dRep. What this means is, and I know the Cardano Foundation, there was definitely some conflict here. The Cardano Foundation has, I don't know how many ADA, millions and millions and millions of dollars of ADA, right? And so what they do is they take, I don't know, it's 50 million, 60 million. I don't know. It's a large amount, right? What that means is that they become a dRep, and they can assign all of their own ADA to their voting power, which means ultimately that they have a much larger ability to affect legislation.
Oh no, that sounds terrible. What?
Well, and so yeah, that is the problem with one ADA, one vote. Right there.
Yes, that seems like a flaw. It's
Exactly.
like there are some who have far too much ADA. If they get in and start voting,
Correct.
they're the only vote that matters.
It also it brings to mind political parties, just like we've seen in the American political system. So is there a way that they're going to ensure that there's just not two, or worse, one?
Yeah. So
now, isn't this is the theory that all political systems ultimately collapse into two?
Yeah,
That's the only thing that makes sense. Isn't that a part of political theory 101, Lucas? I thought that's how it always goes.
It doesn't. It certainly doesn't have to be, and that's not. You want to design political systems so that they do not collapse into two and then to one.
Right. Yeah, I mean, however, like even when you're staking in a stake pool, for example, there are diminishing returns. So if you follow the logic of being able to stake your ADA to a stake pool, again, you can continue to use it. You can continue to spend it. It's not put in a smart contract or anything. It's called live staking. If you follow the logic of, convincing some bunches of whales to subscribe to your stake pool, eventually you develop mathematically, a much, much, much bigger chance of, being the one to produce the blocks. But the problem is there are these things called diminishing returns, right? So in other words, the system has built within itself this ability to, once you delegate or once you stake, I don't know what the number is, but it's like millions. If you stake like 6 million ADA to a stake pool, then any additional stake to that stake pool does not increase your chances of doing it. So in other words, there's this limit to voting power that can be derived from delegating to for example, the
Still seems like there's an attack there because you just started splitting it up into multiple stake pools, and then you just have worked around the limitation. It's almost like you guys need to use the identity system or something to make sure that
is exactly right. That is exactly right. So there's a couple ways that we're talking about fixing this problem, and believe me, everybody's aware that this is a problem. And so the idea was that this would be a minimum viable governance, minimum viable constitution. And it was really just to get things going. And so we're talking about how to do this. And so, so I think we need a identity system. That's right. Where it's not KYC. And I mean, I've talked before about this thing called midnight, which is exactly probably what will ultimately happen. Now they're talking about other things too, like like using something called quadratic voting. And to be honest, I don't know that much about that. But if they use midnight, what they can do is they can have one person, one vote, and people can delegate their their ADA to one person as opposed to as opposed to using all of your ADA as a vote, right? And I don't know, is that better? I'm not sure. In some cases, for example, if you're voting on parameters, right?
I almost feel like you need another token, honestly. It's like you need some kind of a thing that represents not necessarily just like pre-existing ADA, because it's almost like that's functioning as some sort of a stand-in for this is how much I've contributed to the ADA community because I now have a bunch of ADA that somehow I've paid my dues, and that this represents something that is useful because I've done these things in the past. But if you had these imbalanced allocations, or if you had people that were able to acquire at like substantively different types of acquisition costs, or even if you have an agency like this where you say some block of ADA tokens were acquired through some means or were given to them, or that they're owned but through some other mechanism, it's kind of like you have this proxy stand-in for the work that you've done or something.
As I think another solution might be is to block the convertibility. But tokens that go into the treasury, if there was no convertibility into dollars and they had to be retained or moved around in the ADA, like passed through in order to be converted into I don't know, I guess to be sold on an exchange. I don't know how that would happen, but to me there's a big problem here of a big pile of ADA that's going to be attractive for people who aren't necessarily interested in the progress of Cardano, and instead are looking to put that in their pockets and run away as fast as they can.
I think that because of the Constitution and the way it's written, I think that's not going to happen. But on the other hand, I'm not here to convince anybody.
Where can we find the Constitution? I'll throw it on the screen for a second.
Let's see.
Easily accessible.
Yeah. So let's see. I'm trying to think exactly where it is. But if you look up Cardano Constitution, I should have had this. Yeah. So look up Cardano.
I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah. See if you can find it. Right. So yeah, as I was saying, I'm not here to convince anybody that this is absolutely the right thing to do. There's going to be mistakes, there's going to be things, but one of the things that this system has always allowed us to do is to have incredibly difficult discussions, even angry discussions and things like that. And yet in the end, because of the way voting works, even if you don't like the result of the vote happens, right? So, and it happens in such a way that, you put up with it or you leave the system, right?
This
I don't
this
know.
preamble is far less poetic than the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is. At some point in time, I had some when they were first creating this thing.
There's no sense of poetry or political grandeur here.
There really is.
They could have picked a different font too.
I mean, come on. You have a chance to like formalize the first blockchain constitution and you don't get a little flowery language in here or something? Come on. Nobody brought that up?
I thought about it, but I thought, oh, we better be technical more than anything.
What do you think, Lucas? Are you more on the utilitarian side, or should this preamble have had some echoes of whatever poetry or some grandeur?
Well, it should be short clauses separated by periods. So I'm utilitarian in that aspect, but the font, this needs serifs. You got Cardano with the big C. Like every C in Cardano should be double the font size with big old curly Q's and serifs flowing off of it. That's where they could have improved.
That's what we did. Yeah.
So there's still hope there.
I just want us to be aware too that the dReps are only one part of it. So even though the Cardano Foundation has a lot of voting power, the stake pool operators, and if you're aware of what a stake pool operator is, I mean, they are single entities, right? And so they have particularly for different kinds of, for parameter changes and stuff like that, they have equal voting power. So, and they are, another part of this thing. And then there's also the constitutional committee. So it is kind of a triune sort of constitution, or a triune sort of system. And so there are checks and balances, just like there are in the American government. But as I said, I'm not here to convince everybody that this is a perfect system. What I really want to have happen through all this is that we can change things as it becomes obvious that it's a real and utter problem. So the dRep and the voting power sort of scenario with like the Cardano Foundation, it can be changed, and I think it ultimately will be changed. And if you're not aware, at the beginning of this whole process, when when everything went live, IOHK decided to, and this was a big conflict, and it's still an ongoing sort of thing. And so I'm sure there's things behind the scenes. IOHK itself, the company, Charles's company, actually owns probably more ADA than the Cardano Foundation, and they could have used their whatever voting power. They could have become a dRep, and they chose not to do that, so they're not a dRep. But at any point in time, under the rules, Charles has simply agreed that, we're not going to be a dRep for the next year, I think is what he said. Something like that. But then after a period of time, he will become a dRep. And so if IOHK had become a dRep, then the Cardano Foundation definitely would have been counterbalanced by what they wanted to do. And so, I mean, there was this, everyone understood that the Cardano Foundation was not going to be a dRep, but they decided we're going to do it anyway, because there's all kinds of little things going back behind the scenes. And again, I'm not trying to convince people that this is going to be and is a perfect system. It's going to be messy. It's going to be difficult. But I think the system is set up in such a way that we could make it more perfect, which is, what our Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, basically said too. And we're having a hard time doing that. So we'll see what happens in the next year, about whether there's going to be, some possibilities for that. Like I've said before, I think this is kind of it's a new sort of thing. And if I was a political science sort of student, I would study this, because all the same problems that any country forming, writing a new constitution, how to deal with the budget, how to give people rights and voting power and stuff. I mean, we're dealing with the same exact thing. But this is this is a government that exists not by ownership of land. So in other words, there's no land we simply have budget, we simply have projects, we simply have identity we can subscribe to people. But on the other hand,
there's real stakes here. I mean, there's real value that can be dispersed via this organization. So, I mean, exactly. It's not a small number you guys are talking about. This is billions with a capital B. That's it's not an insignificant amount of change to be thrown around.
Yep. So as a dRep, I will always vote and I will always take actions to limit the power. I mean, in general, I can say this is going to be, if you listen to the Democrats and what they're talking about right now, they mentioned that, we're in an oligarchy. We're in an oligarchy. And the funny thing is that the people, the Democrats and the libertarians basically say the same thing. And I sort of think that it's going to be a message that sort of, brings people in. I think it's a good message, but the question is, how do we solve that problem? And so at this point in time, I don't think the Cardano sort of stuff, the governance stuff in the Constitution has and is actually solving the problem quite yet. I hope they can get around to it, but
Rob, as I think about part of the problem that you're faced with is the real limited resource that you have on Cardano is block space, and maybe that's unlimited, but there is amount of time that it takes to record and to prioritize items that are being recorded on block space. Is there any sort of discussion with regards to what should take priority? Because also, as I think about the ideals of Cardano, it would seem to me that they would be privileging information that's being stored or recorded for governments over the private sector. Is there any sort of discussion with regards to those considerations?
Well, what exactly do you mean by storage?
Well, I mean, a blockchain is essentially recording information.
Right. Well,
and I also, as you were talking about the percentage in every transaction that is taken, I also think maybe this is the way of the future, but as governments who are going to be looking for this transaction fee for funding their government,
certainly when we have a CBDC, I mean, if you think about that, that's the ideal place to collect a tax like this. It may not have to actually occur at the L1, but you could bake it into the CBDC for sure.
And there's this notion of pushback from crypto communities against a CBDC, and a lot of that has to do with fears about the social credit aspect of that. But at the same point, I think that there's a lot of future in CBDCs, but we need to balance the control that a government can base with them by having a multitude of CBDCs. And I think about Milei's government down in Argentina. I can't remember the Sturzenegger, I think is the name of his top economist who is in control of it, is Sturzenegger, Federico Sturzenegger. And they are moving some, I'm not sure how much, but they're moving the funding of government into the utility bills of municipalities. And they're specifically trying to remove the federal and the centralized control of Argentina. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, they are, using the utility systems of especially municipalities to Because also tax collection becomes easy whenever you're paying taxes bundled in with the electricity bill. So, and I can see, I can see the problems that exist in the real world whenever we're moving to those sort of systems, but they can be addressed by the use of blockchains, the use of open public records that are immutable to make sure all of that money is going to the right place.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anything here that we're talking about, as far as Cardano is concerned, changes any of that. I mean, you talked about storage. I mean, like everything else in this particular world, you could make an app, and people do a dApp, for example, that has its own sort of funding mechanism. So in other words, you could have it a smart contract that sort of sends a certain amount to a wallet that is accessible, via the app, right, for whatever it wants to use it for, transactions and stuff like that. So you can think of that as another tax, right? And so I think this particular system is sort of tailor-made to do something like that. But I don't know. Again, imperfect. I think it's all going to need to come down to having some sort of identity on the backside in that particular sense. But as far as taxes go, it's so far it probably would be possible for for our government, I should say for the Cardano government and the Constitution, to develop a separate sort of taxational system where it might write something to a federal government wallet or a state government wallet, as well as a wallet for whatever for projects and stuff like the Cardano Treasury. So it probably would be possible to do something like that, but we'd all have to vote on it. It would all have to be entered into code, and the parameter changes would have to be made, and so the node pool operators would have to agree to it. And so remember, what we're also talking about something that's international in scope, right? So it's I would say that probably 3/4 of the dReps are not United States citizens. I think they're probably from some other country, including Argentina. I happen to know at least 3 of them, 3 dReps from Argentina. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how all this is going to work out. But
I think it's amazing that this experiment is happening. Thank you for filling us in. Honestly, this kind of stuff and checking in with the real world applications of blockchain, no matter how flawed it might be, you're talking about a lot of things that could go right or could go wrong. But the fact that this is actually occurring is it's revolutionary, and it's amazing to be covering it and learning about it, because it's stuff that's been speculated about, that blockchain could enable this type of stuff. And so the more that the Cardano community pushes on this, the more you guys push on it, the more the whole world's going to benefit from trying to figure this stuff out. So, I really applaud you guys for getting in here and trying to make this happen, because Charles could have gone a different way. He could have done something much different. He could have done what, the Ripple guys are doing, but he did something different. He's allowed the community to essentially take over ADA. Now the community's got to figure it out. And I think that this is the same kind of a situation that most blockchains are going to run into. It's certainly, I think, the direction that Bitcoin is going to have to go, because they're going to have to try and figure out how they govern themselves and how they move it forward. It's essentially been stuck for a long time.
I don't know. Did you guys hear about this? So recently there was this. This is about Charles. And I saw this actually happen live. I mean, it was on YouTube, but he did it live. So somebody just decided one day, we're going to create a Charles token, so a meme token, right? So somebody did. They created a meme token and just blind deposited 90 billion of these Charles tokens into a wallet, a Lace wallet that Charles had. And so he got there and he looked it up, and 90 billion of these Charles tokens just blind deposited. And so what happened was that these tokens got, traded, and people bought them and sold them. And the next thing you know, within like a day, Charles's value on these tokens was like $80 million, right? So Charles could have gone and just taken the $80 million and do whatever he wants to with it. But instead, what he did was he got live and he says, don't do this. Don't do this to me, or don't do this to anyone else. And he burned all 90 freaking billion of those tokens. So he basically bit bucketed $80 million worth of real value live. I've never seen anything like it. He was $80 million. He just burned because it was principle. He believed in principle. And so he's been doing these little things all along. It doesn't mean you can trust everything he says or that he's right about everything, but damn it, $80 million just burned. I mean, everyone on this, probably listening to this call, would, people murder for that stuff. And he burned it out of principle.
Well, you think about also some of the differences that exist in the world of crypto, in the world of wallets, in which you can figure out a wallet that somebody controls and drop assets into it. And that's going to be something that politicians also have to be wary of. And that can change the game of figuring out a way to incentivize somebody very drastically. But I did not see that Charles, what was it, a Charles token or Hoskinson? What they call it?
It was just Charles token. Yeah. I mean, it is possible, for example, for someone, because these are open protocols. Cardano's an open protocol. You can go to a scanner and see what wallets things have been deposited into. And if you were a government trying to figure out where good money is going to bad things, it basically is traceable. So in other words, someone would be able to say that person received all of these tokens and then that person used them for something else, right? So I mean, you could maybe have a probably a mixer or something like that, but I don't know. I think it is easy to trace things like that, but they still have to be held accountable. And I mean, giving Charles 900 billion of these tokens probably isn't illegal. It just, gosh, it's crazy. I still think about that and go, holy mackerel.
Well, maybe there is a need for addresses that you can control what gets deposited there, but I'm not sure what that looks like. But we're on the top of or at the end of the episode. Thanks for coming on, Rob, and giving us an update on what's going on over at Cardano. Anything you want to close us out with?
No, but I mean, other than I'm going to you guys have all heard my philosophy about this thing. If you are a ADA holder and you want to delegate your ADA to me as a dRep, go ahead and look me up, Grokism, and then just go ahead and delegate your ADA power. Again, you don't lose control over using it. It's still in your wallet. It's still your key, and you can spend it or use it however you want. I will say one other thing, that the latest hard fork, basically what you have to do to withdraw your rewards from staking is you have to actually delegate your ADA to a dRep or your own. You can become a direct voter as well, right? So to withdraw your staking rewards, you have to delegate your ADA to a dRep. I don't know if that's the best thing or not, but that's the way it is. It sort of doesn't allow you to not partake in the system, at least to a point.
All right. Well, we'll have it in the show notes, but it's on the screen too. Or you can look up Rob. I imagine you can find the right details off your X handle, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's all there. So.
All right. Well, maybe if you keep an eye on things when you come back for the next time you're on the show, would love to hear about your favorite projects. I mean, clearly you guys are going to be voting on some stuff, or some amount of this $1 billion may get, proposed to be divvied out in the next little while. I'd be very curious to hear about what projects you think are worthy of your guys' time and attention. I know that oftentimes projects are presented to these things and they're pretty shaky on their foundations, but sometimes things come across that are pretty amazing. And, I imagine you guys will be looking at some stuff pretty closely.
Sure. I think most of them are probably horrible. So I'm going to be very picky with how we spend our money. So at least my power is going to be devoted to what I consider to be good projects. So
love it. Be frugal, be selective, be judicious. And if you like what you're hearing on the show, you like FOMO, go ahead and check us out on YouTube. You can like and subscribe there. Love to have you guys keep track of all the new episodes that are coming out. And if you missed any, you can find old stuff there. It's not really that old. It's just archived. So there's lots and lots of content there. Check us out on YouTube. And we'll see you next time on FOMO.
Awesome. Thanks.